When starting an intravenous, one of the important things to do is to select a good vein. This is where a lot of paramedics go wrong. They just choose any vein, whether it's good or bad, and they try to cannulate it, and it doesn't work, and then they get frustrated, they lose confidence, and things go downhill from there. So look at both arms. Look at both arms and look at the undersides of the arms, look at the forearms, look at the hands, look at the ACs, the antecubital fossa, and choose the best vein for the situation. If you don't need to run in large volumes of fluid, and you can afford to use a smaller cannula, it's always good to start more distal than it is proximal. If you start it up in the ACs, the antecubital fossa, you're taking up those veins for the hospital who might want to draw blood from those larger veins there. But you take what you can get and you use the appropriate vein for the situation. In this situation, when we're just practicing, I'm going to use a distal vein. I'm going to put on a tourniquet to make the veins stand up a little higher, to make them a little juicier and a little easier to cannulate. Then I'm going to make sure I have all my equipment. So I have my appropriate size IV catheter. I have some alcohol swabs ready to go. I have appropriate occlusive dressing, sterile dressing. I have some tape, and I've hung some strips of tape ready to go. Now, so I've chosen my vein. I'm going to prepare the vein by doing a little bit of tapping of the vein. This tends to make the vein just stand up a little. You don't have to whack it hard, but a little tapping tends to make it stand up, make it easier to cannulate. Now, when you're choosing veins, the hand makes a great location for starting an IV, because the hand works like a natural, like a board splint of sorts. So it's a nice stable place to start it. It's flat. Usually there's not too much subcutaneous fat on the hand, so the veins are very prominent. So it's a nice location. You can also use, the wrist veins like the cephalic vein here, or any of the forearm veins as well. I'm going to use the hand veins in this situation. So the other thing you want to do is make sure that you have your sharps container very close by. Now I'm just going to swab the skin, do a nice circular scrub to make myself a nice sterile field. I'm going to let the alcohol dry, because if I don't let it dry and I cannulate the vein, the patient's going to say, hey, that really stings, and it will, because you're introducing some of that wet alcohol right into their under their skin. Now, I was talking about having this sharps container close by. That's really, really important, because you'll see a lot of times in hospital and other places, or even in EMS services, to our shame, we will start an IV, not have the sharps container close by, and then we have this dirty sharp, we don't know where to put it, so we go, partner, can you take that? And we try to hand it to a partner, which is a dangerous thing to do. We stick it in the bed, which is a terrible practice, because someone's going to get stuck with that sooner or later. Or we lay it on the bench, or on the ground, or somewhere, and that's just a bad practice that's going to get someone a dirty needle stick sooner or later, and you certainly don't want that. So, we have our sharps container close by. I'm going to take my IV catheter. The skin is nice and dry. I've chosen my vein. With this particular IV catheter, this brand, it's sort of middle of the road in terms of sharpness. If you use a brand that's really, really sharp, you can afford to use a very shallow angle. If you have a brand that's not quite as sharp, you might have to use a steeper angle. This is sort of a middle of the road brand, as I talked about, in terms of sharpness of the actual catheter. So I can go at kind of a medium grade angle of insertion. So one thing you'll notice I'm doing, I'm taking my thumb of my non-dominant hand and I'm pulling some traction. So I'm putting some traction on the skin. This does two things. One, it holds the skin taut so that the vein is not going to wiggle away on me when I go to cannulate it. And two, it allows me to control the person's hand, so that if they don't like needles and I poke them, they can't suddenly pull away their hand and make me blow the IV. So I'm holding it nice and firm, and I'm telling the patient, you're going to feel a little pinprick in the back of your hand. Take a big deep breath and let it out. And really that's just for distracting the patient. Now once I feel the IV catheter go into the vein, I can see flashback coming in the chamber. See the blood backing up there? It went into the flash chamber. That's how I know I'm in the vein. Once I'm sure that I've advanced the whole thing so that the catheter is in the vein and not just the needle tip, I'm going to advance the catheter off of the needle. Okay. And I'll occlude the vein with my non-dominant thumb so that the blood doesn't come pouring out. And I'm going to take my sharp, and this goes immediately in the sharps container, right? Not on the bed, not on the floor, not anywhere else. Then I'm going to take my IV line, get an assistant to take the cap off for me, and hook that up with aseptic technique. Lower lock that together. And I'm going to run my IV line open to ensure that I have a nice patent line running. I'll know it's patent because there won't be any swelling occurring on the arm, and there won't be a sluggish flow. It should be a nice, easy, free-flowing IV. And there shouldn't be any painful lumps forming. Then I would take my sterile dressing, tape down my IV catheter, always maintaining control of it so the patient moves, but they're not going to have opportunity to pull it out, pull the IV catheter out, or have it accidentally tugged on by anyone. So I'm going to tape it down nicely. I'm going to form a loop. Tape it down again. And then I'm going to do one piece of tape a little more proximal. And this will prevent, say the line gets tugged on. It can get tugged here, but it certainly won't pull on the actual line and blow my IV. And once we're in place, the IV is running well, then we're ready to move on.